All right. We've got a few people in, so we'll start now. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to be having a really important discussion, and before we get into it, I'd like to just start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today. Wherever you're listening in from, I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and those who are here with us. I'm here with you from Naarm, Melbourne, in the language of the Kulin Nation. Naarm means place, and it signifies an area that was an important meeting place for 5 different Aboriginal clans and language groups of the Kulin Nation, and they would meet here, and they've been here for around 40,000 years. So it's a real privilege to be with you from this important meeting place that has this connection. This session today is about understanding and supporting carers in Australia, and it's been run in partnership with Carers Australia. Our goal with this discussion is really to highlight the wide diversity of carer experiences around the country, their everyday stories, their challenges and thoughts about how we can build better support policies and practices, especially in the places that we all work. Now, we have 2 carers here today who'll be sharing their insights and experiences. They both also tap into communities outside of their own experiences and have plenty to share on the emotional, the physical, and financial demands placed on carers. We're also hearing from an employer who's taken steps to create a more inclusive and supportive workplace for carers. So you're going to hear some examples of best practices and strategies that employers can implement to really better support carers at work. Now, if you read and follow us here at Women's Agenda, you will know that the publication is constantly reviewing how structures and systems limit women's participation. While there are many different things that add to such limitations, one key issue is the additional hours of unpaid work women take on. Now, this includes the emotional and physical load of this work. Now, we know parenting responsibilities, of course, are a part of this burden of unpaid work, but that's not going to be the focus of today's discussion, because in addition to taking on the lion's share of responsibilities and unpaid childcare, women also make up 7 in 10 of the 3 million Australians who are unpaid carers. Now, these are carers who provide unpaid care and support to family members and friends who may be living with a disability, mental illness, chronic conditions, terminal illness, alcohol, or some other drug issue, as well as people who are frail aged. So these carers come from all age groups and backgrounds, but 1 in 11 are actually under the age of 25. These carers spend an average of 36 hours a week doing their caring, but for many, it's well over 100 hours a week, which is pretty sobering when you consider the fact that the majority of Australia's 3 million carers are also in paid employment. And like all Australians, you know, they too have their own needs and their own goals when it comes to health, well-being, career, and satisfaction in life. Research by Carers Australia shows a strong correlation between supportive employers and a carer's level of healthy well-being. Those who invest in the well-being of employees also see a number of benefits like increased motivation, morale, job satisfaction, and engagement. So there's a massive opportunity here for employers to not only improve the life of carers on your team, but to also change the whole system. And one way to do this is the Carer Inclusive Workplace Initiative. This was announced by the federal government. It's basically a framework for employers to build more career-friendly workplaces, which we're going to talk about a little bit today. When Women's Agenda heard about this initiative, it was instantly clear that this was something we needed to bring to you, our audience. So Women's Agenda is incredibly grateful for this partnership with Carers Australia. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Carers Australia for partnering with us to make this series possible. Together, we're really hoping this can help transform workplaces and the lives of carers around the country. During this discussion, I would love to hear from you. I'm seeing where some of you are listening in from, so it's great to hear that. You can use the chat function to share questions, any thoughts you have, and also your own experiences of either working with carers or being a carer yourself. On the panel today, we've got Mel Spencer OAM, Anu Wedesinger and Meredith Crute. Mel is a fierce autistic advocate as a parent to 3 autistic teenagers and identifying as autistic herself. She's committed to ensuring that the world is more accommodating and accepting of the autism community. And that includes the people who love and care for people living with autism. She's passionate about making a difference and finding creative ways to overcoming challenges along the way. And she's also the co-founder and CEO of Different Journeys, starting with Merrin Ayton. She started it with Merrin Ayton to ensure that her children could connect with the wider world beyond their bedrooms. Different Journeys aims to provide opportunities for the autistic community to find meaningful ways to connect and empower both themselves and their families. Anu is an experienced HR professional and the Diversity, Inclusion and Wellbeing Manager at QBE Insurance Australia Pacific. She's got deep expertise across all pillars of inclusion and wellbeing, plus HR business partnering experience across a range of sectors. She's worked in financial services, insurance, retail, as well as the not-for-profit sector, and she's been a champion for inclusion for more than a decade. She's driven culture change in some of Australia's most well-known organisations, so she's got a lot to share with us today. And finally, Meredith, a partner, daughter, mother, friend, and carer. She's also spent nearly 4 decades as a human rights advocate working with vulnerable people across government, NGOs, and the corporate sector. She currently co-chairs the National Carer Strategy Advisory Committee with the Department of Social Services. 6 years ago, Meredith took on an unexpected role as full-time carer of a young adult daughter who developed a severe and persistent mental illness. This impacted her daughter's life, facing tremendous and ongoing life and death challenges. Meredith had to step away from a professional career she loved to ensure her daughter remained tethered to this world. Thank you so much to all of you for being here and adding to this really important discussion. Now, I've got a few questions to start us off. And for everyone listening in, please do feel free to send through your questions in the chat box. Mel, I'd like to start with you. Can you share your personal experience of being a carer, including how this has changed your journey in paid work and ultimately led to the career that you have now? You just got to turn on the microphone, Mel.
You'd think after all this time we would get organised with that, wouldn't you? Good. Hi, everyone. It's really lovely to be here. My name's Mel Spencer, and as Danush has given me a lovely introduction, when we started Different Journeys, we actually started for our own children because I was that parent nobody wanted to talk to in the schoolyard. I couldn't go to work because the school kept ringing me because they weren't managing my child. And so Merrin and I discovered that there was no voices for the carers or the parents. And that needed to change because we also can peer model to our own young people about what supports are available, how to accept help and support. So the evolving thing of Different Journeys, what started as a volunteer base to now we have 64 employees and 96% of them are either a carer and or autistic person. So we're really proud of the fact that the lived experience, but it comes with its own set of challenges too, as Anu will be able to explain. And I think the other bit is we're trying really hard that the carer recipient is not a burden. The carer recipient is allowed to fly because we too are providing that scaffolding and support around them. So it's always hard when we're talking about caring to make sure that we're still maintaining the dignity of the person we're caring for.
Thank you for that, Mel. Meredith, I have a similar question for you. How have you found it, going from this career that you really loved to now being a full-time carer, and have the two intersected in any way?
Look, I feel really blessed to have had the career I've had, and I think it gave me an enormous amount of understanding for the people around me. Probably what I hadn't thought is what it would feel like to experience that for me. And I think this scope creep occurs, probably something that many people resonate with on the line, is that I didn't recognize I was a carer. I was just a mum. And those jobs that you do become more and more, and you realize that the distance between you and people around you and the things they're doing actually widens. And so it wasn't until someone came up to me and said, I think you're a carer. And I was quite violently opposed to that initially because it just wasn't either how the person I cared for wanted me to be seen, nor how I wanted to be seen. But sometimes you have to lean into something to accept that you need different help. So that was kind of the creep, I suppose, to get there. And I think the moment it also changed with my career was when I realized I felt I was letting myself down, my team down, my organization down, my daughter down and my family down, but ultimately myself down. And I really needed to pause to reflect where I'd landed and what we need to do. And I think the important thing with caring is it's not a static space either. You have to be really agile, and things actually do change. They don't always get better, but they change in terms of, especially with an episodic illness. So I think that process is one that everyone goes through. It's sort of, sometimes it might happen overnight, something might happen to someone, but there is this kind of creep that occurs. And so where I got to very quickly is realizing I couldn't do full-time work and being really blessed to have a bit of a subject matter expertise. And so where I landed was really doing contracting work so that I could fit it into my caring responsibilities, which meant that it was more inherently flexible for me. I got to choose the organizations that I felt aligned with, who valued me, who I valued. I had more control over timeframes and when I worked. And I guess I wasn't as tethered to the organization, which we'll talk about can be problematic. But it also means I don't necessarily get those connections or outings or those things that come with those sort of roles. I don't get any paid sick leave or leave, but I do get to do the things that are important to me, hashtag moments at a time, which is important. Thank you.
Can you describe the, I guess, the emotional toll it's taken trying to strike that balance? And as you say, it's a thing that's continuously evolving. How do you manage all of that?
This won't be a Pollyanna moment, unfortunately, so be prepared. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not impacted by those tolls. Very impacted at the moment. We're going through a pretty hard time as a family, and I think it's overwhelming tiredness, it's loneliness, because if you're trying to work and care, then those other relationships that you do need in your life, there just isn't enough time, and often your social battery's just done because you're on the phone a lot at work trying to manage caring while you're at work. If I did decide this year that I would try and go into the office at least one day a week. That's my respite, and that generally can work. I think you feel guilt because you feel like you should be at home. I think there's anxiety and depression is huge amongst carers, and certainly something that I've struggled with over the time. I use my circle of support and friends and my family are what keep me going. There's that real detachment. I think you can get to burnout where you're just exhausted at home and you still want to do your best at work, but you can feel quite detached. So I often will go in and just sit there and work. Like, it is so nice to start something and finish something and walk away. That's not something you often get to do in your caring role. So that's pretty important. I think the other impacts are, that's that cognitive overload, because your carers are incredibly strong people. Well, something I really object to is bring them in for their soft skills. We are not soft people, right? We know how to get stuff done. We're really good lobbyists. We're really good advocates. We're great with time management. So I think bringing that to work is really important. But I think acknowledging when you get to a point where my job isn't satisfying me as much, there will be times. As I said, it's this kind of it's not static, so you'll feel better sometimes than others, I think, unfortunately. But I also think it's important for carers to understand what they can do. So there's a responsibility on us too. What does it look like? As you said at the beginning, can we actually tether work to the respite that we get? And how can we make it as successful for everyone? Which means like most people get to go to work and just think about themselves, but that's okay if it makes it better for us and the outcome's better for the people that we're caring for. That's a really important piece to play.
Yeah, Mel, does it feel like that's about the same for you, trying to strike this balance of of doing what you have to do, but then also checking in on your own mental health? We can't hear you, Mel, sorry.
I've got my dog barking in the background, so I had to keep turning it off.
Sorry.
I totally agree with everything Merritt has said, but I also probably what I'm really trying to model is a strength-based approach, right? So rather than always looking at the negative, we'll look at less what we can do. So one of the things that I've taught is, because if I fall apart, then the whole family falls apart. So I needed to actually give myself permission to access supports. And those supports can look different for everybody. It could be that I've got meals prepared in the fridge. So if everyone's having a bad day, then I don't have, there's a healthy meal for us to pick out. It could be getting house cleaning in. It could be, and through the supports that I've been able to access, and that then enables me to be there for my kids, to be able to take them to appointments, to do the things beyond normal parenting. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a product of someone who's really good. I access supports myself. I regularly access therapy, and I've built up a village. And the people I learn the most of are other people who've walked the journey similar, not the same, but similar to mine. And I'm being quiet there because I could keep going.
We'll pull out more as we're going through, but those are really good points. I mean, building a village around you as you're doing this, that's a great point. And to what you said, Meredith, these are not soft skills that you have, which I think more employers around the country could do better at valuing and recognizing. I know from your perspective as an employer, can you share what QBE is doing to really empower carers like this in the workforce, and why you've decided to go this path?
Yeah, sure. And first, I just want to acknowledge and thank Mel and Meredith for sharing some of their experience. And in my kind of personal time, I'm also part of my children's school inclusive committee. So some of what they're sharing in terms of parents who are also carers, sometimes not realising that. So we're doing a lot in that space to help carers at schools realise, the support that's available to them as well. But in terms of the workplace, what we're doing at QBE, I guess our approach really fundamentally is part of our inclusion strategy, where we really want to have a workplace culture that fosters a sense of belonging for our people, where they feel valued, respected, and psychological safety is really key. So we refer to that as safety to speak up internally. And that has really great alignment with our organisational purpose as well, and that is to enable a more resilient future. So that not only applies to our customers and the communities in which we operate, but obviously extends to our people. So we really try to position and frame what we do in that lens. Practically speaking, we're a founding partner of the National Work and Family Standards, which was established by UNICEF Australia and Parents at Work, and in 2021 became one of the first organisations to become a family-friendly workplace. So what does that mean? That's basically best practice standards to support people to integrate family, caring and work. So it looks at things like your approach to flexible work, family care, well-being, some of the themes we've already started touching on today. And for us, it's recognising that caring and families come in all shapes and sizes. We all face different experiences and challenges on any given day. So that might be talking about navigating aged care. It might be caring for someone with a disability, a neurodivergent child, someone with a chronic health condition. So we really try to focus on those different kind of experiences, the lived experiences of our people, where they're willing to generously share. And we know that from our employee listening survey, so basically our engagement survey, approximately 15% of our workforce in Australia are carers, of all those different types of kind of caring arrangements. So we really try to mainstream and actively talk about caring in all its forms, and really try to challenge outdated stereotypes as well, to kind of debunk myths and stigmas that might still be out there about what is a carer, and their needs. And that well-being and mental health piece is really critical to what we do as well.
It sounds like there's a lot of scaffolding that has to go into this, just to support the cultural change as well. How can employers also, ensure that the support that they're offering to carers doesn't get lost in, there's a lot of focus on parents as carers, but how can they ensure that the carers of other types of individuals is also being really looked after?
I think it's a really valid point. As I touched on, when we talk about being family friendly, we really try to bring out those different experiences, so the different lived experiences and the topics or themes, if you like. So, navigating aged care, caring for disability, neurodivergence, all those different experiences we know our people are going through. So for us, it really fundamentally starts with raising awareness. That is really key. So you can do that very easily through, your internal communication channels. We do that through storytelling, which is so powerful and very underestimated, I think, sometimes. We find that through storytelling and sharing experiences, people really resonate with that. Even if it's not their own experience, it just opens their eyes to other perspectives and helps them walk in other people's shoes. Another way we do that is by taking a person-centric approach. So asking the person. Again, we know people have different needs and challenges and experiences we're all going through, but really walking the talk when it comes to inclusion, that's something we really strive to do across all of our different focus areas. To bring that to life a little bit, a recent example of that has been a focus on neurodiversity, which has included the development of a workplace guide and a podcast series internally. And in developing all of that, we actually sought feedback from an internal working group, which consisted of carers of neurodivergent people and family members. And they reviewed everything from obviously the content, the language that we use, were we hitting the mark, even the images. That visual representation is really critical as well. And the feedback was just overwhelmingly positive because particularly carers of neurodivergent people who felt seen, they felt heard, that we were actually having this conversation in the workplace, talking about what support is available, but in a really practical way, and just amplifying that focus and placing the spotlight on neurodivergence as an example, and the carers' experience as well. So I think designing with the community for the community is really critical for employers to think about. And looking at your different policies, procedures across the employer life cycle as well.
When things like that podcast came out and people are starting to hear about these stories and maybe experiences they hadn't even thought their colleagues were going through, what has that done to the team morale there?
It's really positively impacted that safety to speak up culture that I touched on at the very beginning. So that psychological safety, the belonging, the trust, just the fact that people have courage to now actually share that part of their life and their identity has gone so far. And it's actually led to more and more people share, whether it's not their direct experience, they could be an aunt or an uncle, or, have someone in their extended family or network who is supporting, say, a neurodivergent person. So it's really, if anything, really had a positive impact on our culture.
And Mel, what else do you think, looking at all of those different initiatives employers can take, it's quite fascinating because I think one of the cool things too is it increases empathy for the experiences of so many people. But what else do you think can employers do to really identify and support carers in the workplace?
Often people aren't aware of how many service systems a carer is trying to juggle, and particularly if you're a sandwich carer as well. When I talk sandwich, I'm caring for children and adults or their parents or partners, and having an awareness of just how many service systems that person is having to deal with. And when you're coming to talk to them about something that's very important to you, you don't know that they've actually got 10 other phone calls or 10 other conversations going at the same time. And so I guess it's about awareness and understanding and actually going, how are you? Because you might be the first person to have ever checked in, and they will talk about the person they're caring for, and you'll go, no, how are you? Right. And that leads to a whole different, and I just love safety to speak up. That's such a good phrase. Having an organizational statement that you support carers enables safety to speak up. Having buddies or peer support groups within an organization, exactly what Anu was talking about with the parents of the neurodivergent, part of the reason also recognizing as carers, our needs are different depending on who you're caring for, and acknowledging that, and, creating more under the gender equity and diversity, I think is really important to start those conversations. And obviously flexible work could be task driven, not hour driven. That's something we do within ourselves, is that look at the task rather than the hours.
In a workplace where these conversations are not happening, what do you think would make it safe to speak up for a carer?
We're actually currently working with some organizations doing this at the moment. And one is about cultural awareness. So it's about validation. You know, internally, you can create an intranet page or an internal thing of just all the lists of services that someone can go to if they need help, you know, or recognizing as an employer that you actually don't have to have the answers, but what you need to know is how to connect them in to provide support for the answers. And I think for me, that was really liberating, to know that I didn't have to have all the answers. I just needed to connect people in, because there is so much good supports out there in the community, but how do you find out about it? And the employee assistance program is another one that a lot of employers don't recommend highly enough, because they go, oh, carer, do they qualify? Well, yeah, there's a lot of supports out there. Yeah.
And I've got another question to add for Meredith, but I just want to open up to our audience too. In a few minutes, we'll be taking your questions. So have a little think and text them through into the webinar chat. Also, shout out to Karen, who says she's a sandwich carer, just like you, Mel. Meredith, from an employer's point of view, I know you've advocated for the need for job crafting and really enabling contingency plans for people who become carers unexpectedly or need to take time off for caring duties. So that might include then for an employer to go beyond traditional flexible work policies. Can you explain how that might work?
Sure. And I think Mel mentioned this idea also of looking at tasks is really important. A lot of these great resources on the Carer Inclusive Workplace hub as well. It actually shows you what you, as Mel just said, what you could put on a hub. So it gives you ideas. All the resources are there. There's some training that is free also. So just to point everyone off to that website, because there's some great resources there. Look, I think flexibility is misunderstood. I think people think that just means, you know, working from home, whereas actually I think it really means being able to be agile and adaptive to different and changing needs. And that's what carers need. They need not just, oh, set and forget, here you go, here's your, you know, part-time work. It might be that you have an opportunity to lean in a little bit more because things change for a few months, or, you know, you get an opportunity for a bit of a break. So I think that's work hours is obviously the kind of easiest thing. So altering work hours to fit carers' needs. And so it's very outcome task focused, as Mel said. So, you know, I'll get the job done. I'll do it in the time that I can do it, but I will deliver. There's location. That's really the easy bit, I suppose. Different sites and home and the office. There's the workload. So that's really about that task flexibility. Can you, you know, the crafting means, can you pull apart some of the job where that's your superpower and give some of the other stuff to like a development opportunity, for example, for someone else in the organization. There's flexible work hours and the job design piece. And that could be part-time. Job sharing, something we really have to step up to. I think that's, you know, we talk about it, and there's some great examples coming across government lately of some people starting to job share some major roles. That's really important. I think your leave policies have to be flexible, not just I can take sick leave or holiday leave, because you normally don't have much leave left. The career breaks idea, so your legitimacy around why I would take a break. Your parent might be at end of life and you might need that 3 months just to be able to give your whole self over to that experience, for example. So really, as you know, Anu said, being able to talk about those things quite openly. And I think the technology and tools are really important to enable that flexibility, so that, you know, you're able to plug in wherever you are, be it hospital ward at midnight or, you know, or at home, that's really supporting you. So I think, you know, this concept of flexible is, during COVID, people go, well, we're already flexible. We let people work from home. It's so much more than that. It really is going, what could make it work? Let's talk about all of those little adjustments that actually mean that you can just deliver really well, and it doesn't really matter where you're going to deliver it. So I think that's incredibly important.
So just a much bigger, I guess, a more nuanced look at what flexible working is for different people. Mel, what can you share regarding the career goals and aspirations of some of the carers that you've supported? And like, you know, what are their concerns and that kind of thing?
For some, we've done work with carers who aren't working, and what are the barriers to getting them to enter the workplace. And then we've also worked with carers in the workplace and what the barriers are for them. But often we need backup plans. right? So, because as soon as something goes wrong, the first thing to go is often employment. But if we've got backup plans in place for if this happens, and often that comes through by talking through with, you know, whether it's a therapist or even someone else who's walked the journey about what they did, and then connecting them to other supports and services. And the shared language is another one, with common goals and careers, because even and it's good because I'm very practical, and Meredith is, you know, she's talking high level, right? But a lot of and we need a combination of both, but a lot of our carers have been so intimidated by language, you know, that's actually a barrier for them filling forms out or even applying for a job in the first place. And I think even to apply for a job, who says we have to do a written CV? Who says, who made those rules, you know? So we've got an opportunity to change what that looks like. You know, I remember one carer, and her whole goal in life, she just wanted a job at Coles. That was her dream. And all of the things were in place that couldn't even allow her to do that. 3 years down the track, she's working at Coles, you know, because people believed in her and having a backup to everything. I think as well, a flexible work location. So it's not just working from home or an office. You know, it's like we've got a policy about what happens when the power goes out because we don't have an office, right? And it's giving them 5 different other options they can go to if the power goes out, you know, at their home, to enable them to still work, you know. Yeah, so I mean, and careers and aspirations are valuing yourself first and foremost, because before you're a carer, you had skills. You might have gone to university, you had a job. Those skills are still with you, right? And that's what everyone forgets. I remember going to parties and people say, what do you do? And I'll say, I'm a carer. And you can see their whole face glaze over as though you're not worth talking to, right? But before that, I was something. So it's really empowerment of re-looking at, we've got skills, we matter, and there's lots of other ways we can contribute, and we should have the dignity of choice. And at the moment,
dignity of
everyone's
choice, yeah. That's a powerful way of looking at it. And I think, yeah, I think we can all do better at not dismissing people when they don't have the flashy career titles we think is what matter in the society, for sure. Anu, what advice or insights can you share for those working in HR or similar roles when it comes to, you know, supporting and I think really fundamentally valuing the work that carers do?
A lot of thoughts on this. Before I get into that, one thing I wanted to touch on that Mel mentioned, in terms of sometimes we might not always have the answer, but it's about knowing where to go to access it. I think that's particularly important for people leaders in our organisations. Obviously, that role modelling piece and being able to have those conversations with team members is really important. But I think at the same time, we ask a lot of our people leaders, and if they don't have the lived experience, then it could be challenging for them. So what we really focus on, again, is that awareness raising. So even if they don't have the answer immediately, they at least know where to go to get that support to help the person in their team. So that's a big focus of ours too. And we have various networks in place to help our people. In terms of my advice or tips for people in HR or similar, I think there's a few things. Always bring it back to your overarching strategy. It's not just a good thing to do, but it has great business benefits. So when we talk about these conversations, we, you know, are better able to attract good talent to our organisations because they can see that we're living our values and care for our people and make that investment, which hopefully translates to retaining good talent. And also for us, with that neurodiversity example I shared earlier, it's really helped people feel really proud to work at QBE too, because we're normalising conversations like this. Some other aspects that we've made the link to in our business case is our gender equality strategy. So again, sometimes you see those outdated gender stereotypes that sadly still exist. Even broader things like sexual harassment, FDV, we lean into those conversations, which can be challenging and uncomfortable, but really important. And really embedding our workplace culture of respect is really critical as well. Early this year, some people might know that there was a report released, the National Working Families Report, which was released by Family Friendly Workplaces and UNICEF Australia, which really honed in on that well-being of carers as really a priority. So it found 74% of women and 57% of men in Australia with caring responsibilities feel stressed. Obviously not a surprise when balancing work, caring and family. So I think that's something that we're very conscious of in terms of our initiatives, really making that link to well-being. It looks different for different people. I saw a question in the chat about self-care. I think you've got to find what works for you, because I'm not sure there is a silver bullet answer. And it could be really taking a holistic approach, whether it's, physical, mental, the different things to look at. And I think, Are You OK Day was last week. So such a timely conversation to really prioritise this. A couple of other quick things before you wrap me up, Danushi, but, obviously Carers Week is coming up in October as well. So that's a really great opportunity for organisations to start talking about this if they're not already. And that can be as simple as sharing those lived experiences and storytelling. It's not hard to do. We talked about flexible work, hybrid. Another thing we probably haven't touched on much, but is workplace adjustments. They're generally quite low cost and straightforward to implement, but it comes down to having a conversation with the person about what that might look like for them, and that could change over time. And I think if you're just starting out, just be very strategic in what you decide to do. It could be 2 to 3 things that you do really well in the first, say, 18 months or so. Evaluate that over time, and then it's being very deliberate about ongoing embedding. So for us, it's not just a launch, set and forget. It's how do we keep having these conversations and raising more awareness within our business and the support available for our people.
Thank you so much for that, Anu. Now we're going to open up to audience questions. So if there was anything, we've covered quite a lot, and there were some really powerful points made and ideas and suggestions. So if there's anything you want us to kind of break down or go into a little bit in more detail, just send it through in the chat line. Also, Meredith shared a really great resource. So careinclusive.com.au is a good resource on how to have some of the conversations we've been talking about. It also offers free training to employers and anyone who is a carer and also seeking work. Now, Patricia, who's been with us, thanks for joining us today. She is asking, we've touched on this a little bit, but recommendations for self-care. As we heard today, it's something that's really critical when you're trying to balance all of the things that are happening while also just trying to have a satisfactory life. Mel, do you have any ideas you can share on what are good ways to take care? I mean, what's worked for you?
Like I said earlier, giving myself permission that I'm not lazy or bad because I get people to come in and clean my house, because I get, some of my washing sent out and done. It's, for me, that's self-care, because that's nurturing. It might just be sitting down, reading a book, or going for a massage. You can do the traditional, or you can come back to, well, what is it that works for me? Because just because I like it doesn't mean, one of my team, she's who's on the call, she loves RuPaul, right? And so for her, that's what she does, and we have a bit of a laugh and whatever else, but it's about finding what brings you joy. Often.
Do you mean RuPaul, the show, the
Yes.
TV show? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Amazing drag show. Yeah, very
Yeah, she loves all that, right? But for her, that's her self-care. Sorry, Annie, I'm talking about you, but I think that, just to give you different examples, it doesn't have to be, oh, I need to go away for a weekend, or I need to do this. It could be, I'm trying to encourage my children with support workers to cook once a week, and so they're coming in, they're learning practical skills, and I'm getting advantage out of that.
Yeah, I like to think of self-care as it's whatever for you feels like a hug that you can't get from other people. So in your own time, what feels like a hug? So like you said, RuPaul, I have a nice list of reality shows that I just like to just watch. Not the toxic ones, because that doesn't feel like a hug for me. But for you, Meredith, what are some really good self-care that has worked for you?
I'd love to say I was good at it, but everyone that knows me would say I'm really bad at it. But what I put in the chat is I think you really got to accept that you know who you can lean on, know where to fold them, know when to, that one. Really important. That's how we keep each other upright, is we lean on each other. So having those people, really quickly in your favorites on your phone, that's a good one for me. Knowing that there are services and sometimes you need someone to say, I think, guess be kind, like Mel said, it's okay to get some help with some cleaning or food, or when things are really tough, that's actually the way that you get through. And that might give you a moment, to have a little bit of time to yourself. So I think it's really, really personal. I think I know that I need more self-care when lots of my village start contacting me more and going, are you okay? Because I know that that's a sign. And often, they know I may or may not take up on their offers because I've got to get sort of some respite. But I think it's being kind to yourself, and it takes some time to work out what works. Some of the things that used to work, don't now. So really identifying, what brings you joy, what just brings you a moment of happiness. Sometimes it is bad reality TV, sometimes because it makes my life look glorious. And I think, oddly, the gift of perspective, I have to say, the National Carer Strategy consultations, just listening to other people and talking to other carers. And I think that's what we can bring to the workplace. Every time I might tell a little story, and I don't do it often, but people go, oh, that's me too. And so I think this ability to just share that we can't other anymore. There's 3 million that we know of carers in Australia. We're all going to have to do it. We're all going to be cared for at some point, and we're all going to have to do it. And so let's make it more normal. We're just people who are trying to look after people around us. So I think if we can normalize it, stop being superheroes, because I do not wear my underpants on the outside of my pants, and I don't have a cape. We're doing the best we can to help each other. So let's lean in more. Let's look out for one another more. I think really being prepared to say to people, what can I do to help you do something that might bring you joy is important too. So reach out a hand and be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. With your responses, it really shows that self-care isn't this big thing that you have to go and spend and dedicate a time to, which none of us have. It could just mean allowing yourself to nap because your body just needs it right now, and that's okay, and then go back to life again. So then you've ticked off your self-care for the day. So this question came in from Karen. She says, I love the idea, Mel, of no CV. So how would you go about, I'm curious, how would you go about then advocating for yourself in a job without a CV?
Yes, so there's quite a few workplaces now, particularly in the neurodivergent space, because they're barriers, and it's about, well, what's the goal of you coming to work? What are your skills? And you can have an interview. You don't necessarily have to, you can do a recording of yourself. This is really more in a new question than me, but, we are providing the modifications within our workplace about how we can do it. But it's just reframing and changing how you view things, because there's options everywhere. There should be 5 different options to being able to apply for a job.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Meredith, before we move on to the next question? Yeah. Now this one was on job sharing. There's a lot of love for job sharing, especially in senior roles, because it would mean that, people can also still have ambitious goals while continuing on with their important work as carers. For you, Anu, has QBE got anything that works to help people do job sharing at the senior level?
I don't have an example to talk to that's off the top of my head, but I think it's just being a bit more innovative and creative in terms of how roles are structured. So there'll probably be certain business units within an organisation where it naturally makes sense. If you've got a really great senior leader advocate, that always helps. Sometimes it helps to pilot in a particular area where we know, again, we've got that senior leader support. So I think it's coming down to just being, a bit more creative, innovative in how we structure our roles. And at the end of the day, going back to the earlier conversation, focusing on those outputs and outcomes rather than, being present for X amount of hours. And, obviously noting a disclaimer there, not all roles can be positioned that way. So, that flexibility might not always be afforded, but, think differently about different types of flexible work that could be available. To Meredith's point, this flexible work can cover so many different types of arrangements. So just be open to considering them, I think.
Thank you for that, Anu. Diane also raised a point from before saying, I think it was Mel that mentioned, like looking at the recipient of your care, not as a burden. So she's asking, how do you hold space for that when you are caught in the day-to-day of doing it?
Yeah, that's something I've always, particularly as I've become speaking publicly, I've also got to maintain the dignity of my children. So my son gives me full permission to talk about anything about him. My daughters, not so much, but we have gathered that. I think the other bit is peer modeling to them. So sometimes what I say is not going to make any difference, because who am I? What would I know? But bringing someone else in to, like, for example, right, I had a declutterer come in, right, to try and help with my children. It took 6 months of her turning up, and they went, oh, this woman keeps coming back. All right, I'll talk to her now. Right. And so I guess it's about looking at what the goals are and breaking them down, to, I've got them out of their room. I've got, it's like when you're having a really bad slump. What are you grateful for? I got up out of bed for 5 minutes, because 5 minutes is better than none at all. And so trying to navigate and hold those two roles. And sometimes I say to the kids, I'm in overload. And I let them know, but it's not because of them. I'll say it's because of the NDIS and the school and, all of these other things. Yeah.
For sure. Those are good points. Did you want to add anything to that, Meredith?
Look, I think this is a really tough, it's a tough conversation, and it's tough because carers haven't got a voice really, and we're trying so hard to be everything to everyone. So I think it just comes down to, the fact that it's up to $792,000 that carers can lose in superannuation and salary, sort of in that space of caring over 15 years. And so for me, it's not that it's the emotional burden, and it's not even the word burden. It's the impact is real. So that means that I wouldn't be able to buy all the medication that my daughter needs. I wouldn't be able to have a house, like the risk to my livelihood, which impacts her directly. So I think it's where you can pull it apart and where it's a unit together, and that's why we need, government and more support to step up for carers, so that actually those, I guess, systemic burdens, not burdens from the person, are addressed, because then we can keep caring as well as we possibly can. But, with the changes in aged care and NDIS, this is real. People are going to have to be caring more and more. And what that does is, for the next generation, I can't imagine that I'll have the opportunity to say, I want to age at home. And I want to spend all my money to age at home and have my family look after me, because it's a reality I won't have that money. So I think they're the big challenges that we have to keep advocating for. How can we minimize those unintended consequences and constraints on carers, so that we can keep wrapping ourselves around the people that we love, helping them have the best life they can, but also helping us participate and have human rights as well is really important. Because I think during the consultations, it was so hard to get, as someone said earlier, to get carers to talk about themselves, not about the person they care for. So there is this balance. The balance isn't there right now. And when it's not about sitting around and moaning about it, it's how can we fix it? How can we have great lives ourselves, and opportunities to age well, I guess, into that phase. So big systemic issues that we hope that we can keep addressing as this conversation becomes more open, and more important.
And I think this is a really important part of it, because the more we share about our experiences, then it kind of helps shift things, and you can kind of figure out, oh, okay, this is a system or structure that's not working. Here's where we need to make some changes. Karen shares very honestly, she says, I have a very little superannuation at age 58. I've worked so hard with no long service leave or sick days, but I have got nothing to show for it except tiredness, which speaks to what you and Mel was saying about this is the reality. Diane says, in this era of anti-aging versus pro-aging, with our population majority being over the age of 60, she's curious, how can we support carers in healthy aging processes? And I'll open that for anyone. If you want to start, Meredith.
Yeah, I do a lot of work in the aged care space, and I think this is really important. I think this is what you mean. That it's important that we start acknowledging that, and I think I'll talk to myself. I'm not very good at looking too much into the future because I'm a bit scared of what's there. But there's some proactive things we have to do, and we know with this aging population, and there's going to be, I think it's 3 times as many people over 80 in 20 years. We know that we have to start looking after ourselves and getting stronger, or those implications and those impacts are actually going to be really serious. So I think this is part of that conversation. It's knowing that we will well be caring for someone who's, older than us. And if we're those sandwich parents too, it's both. So I think that self-care in a more proactive way, those conversations and really thinking about programs that help you do that. And, we've talked about things like, is there extra mental health appointments that carers could have? That the doctors actually acknowledge that you're a carer, and that actually are you, helping you, I guess, walk along beside you about navigating both your health as well as the people you're looking after, and acknowledging that, if you don't spend time on your health today, you'll be spending time on your illness later. So there's some work we really have to do in reminding each other as a generation that it's not going to get easier. And so how do we do it? So I don't have the magic answers. I just know it's really necessary. And I think we do it together by walking alongside and saying, literally, let's go for a walk together. That might be the self-care moment, but also the investment in the future moment. So how can we do is, that's the task focus, right? Let's put it all together and tick off a few things at once.
Absolutely. Mel, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, I think Meredith has answered it really well. I think that one of the other challenges is where you live too, whether you're regional and rural versus, metropolitan, and particularly with the aging, that creates a whole set of challenges. We work up in regional and rural, and the lack of supports up there is really hard to be positive. And I guess the other bit is one of the things that we can all share is, what does success look like? Because success for you, like this storytelling that Anu's talking about, success for you might actually be the one thing someone's never thought of. And unless we start talking about it that way, we also need to celebrate. But, we also need to find things to celebrate. And it was really interesting. I just had my last ever school meeting. And my psychologist says, after 17 years, and my psychologist said, so what are you doing to celebrate the fact that you have survived the education system? And it was something that I'd never considered, right? Because it's always about the kids. I went, oh my God, I have survived it. Well, not quite, but, survived the education system. And I need to acknowledge and celebrate that, because that's a journey for me, not just for my children. And and so many people I've spoken to about that, it's stopped them enough in their tracks to go, she's right.
Yeah.
Really good.
And I think, yeah, exactly. And to come out on the other end of that and still be going and still be having so much light to share with others is, that is well worth celebrating. And Diane says a type of carer graduation.
Oh, well, I think my co-worker and I are going to go and smash plates and pretend they're all the things that went wrong in the education and the journey. But yes.
Yeah. Melbourne has these breaking rooms that you can go and just break stuff. It's very therapeutic. We've got a few more minutes left. Oh, sorry. Did you want to add something, Meredith? We've just got a few more minutes left. I've had a question here from Olivia. I'll open it to Anu and then Mel and Meredith if you want to add anything to this. Olivia says, we've spoken today about how workplaces and leaders can support carers at work. How can co-workers share their support as well?
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, because at the end of the day, how we show up for each other has a really big impact on well-being and our belonging in our teams. I think keep it really simple. We don't need to overcomplicate things, check in on the person regularly, but probably not too much to add to that burden. So, have a chat with them, really practice active listening. I think really listen to what they're saying in terms of if they're sharing what their challenges might be, or what support even they might need. Whether that's from a professional setting in terms of the workload, is that a chat you need to have with the leader in the team as well, or even personally if they know each other, on a more friend basis. So I think it's, checking in with them and having those, what can they practically do to support them, I think is really important.
Meredith, you want to add something to that? I just wanted to talk about this reciprocity piece. I think you're right, Anu. I think people often don't ask in an open way. Maybe they're scared what you're going to say, but I think being open enough to ask is really important, because there's all this learning you can do. And it's not that you're going to download with them about the bad night you've had, but actually people go, oh, actually my mum's getting older too. And how do you do that? So you can actually become, I think this, carers don't want everyone to be coming to them, dancing around them and going, are you okay? We actually want reciprocal relationships where we can contribute. One of the great programs I did once in an organization was create carer circles so that someone didn't have to ring their boss and say, my mum's sick again. You actually relied on each other, and the learning that happened, to prepare people for other things that were happening in their lives, and being able to lean on each other, even if it meant that I would have to go and the young woman in my team might want to go to spin class. That's fine, right? No judgment. An afternoon a week. So feeling like I wasn't always the one taking was really good. So I think opportunities for contribution and reciprocity, and let's face it, we've got these superpowers of all the system stuff that Mel talked about. So we can share a lot of that, and that's really important for people. There's not one person in an organisation that couldn't learn from NDIS and aged care and mental health systems. So how can we contribute differently? But I think it is the leaning in and being brave enough to go, I'm not overstepping the mark, but are you okay? And how things are going. And it's that very gentle being kind to each other. We need to be kinder.
Yeah, absolutely, including to ourselves. And Karen says, I didn't survive the education system for my ASD PDA son. It crushed me to the ground, but I'd like to take myself out now for a celebration to myself for keeping my son alive during those horrible years. So well done. Yes, absolutely, Karen. And to everyone listening who, is going through this, take those moments to celebrate, because it is a daily, you're winning every day, you keep going. And as Mel and Meredith are showing us. Also, Anu, thank you so much for being here today. We've got 4 minutes left and there's one more question. We'll try and squish in the answer. Alison has just asked, could the NDIS better support carers? Just interested in thoughts. So we'll start with you, Meredith, Mel, and then Anu.
I want to start with Mel.
Mel.
I have got myself put in my children's goals, right? That and it's a tip people don't know that it's available, because the first point of call is it's not about you, it's about your child, or you need to step up and do better parenting and all of those kind of things. So yes, the NDIS can definitely better support carers, but I think we have to be quite realistic when they're trying to cut the NDIS. How can we maintain that carers are still supported? So it's being creative and finding different ways. And that could be like what Anu's doing at QBE. There's so many other options, but I think at the moment, carers don't feel they've got a right to anything. And I think that's what we want to change, the right to choose to be employed, the right to choose, to be able to show up. Some days I turn up in my pajamas. But I've showed up, and that's enough, and that's kind of something that it's modeling to everyone else around. So in a simple answer, yes, the NDIS should do more, but in what's really going on, I can't see that happening, but there's lots of other things that we can do.
And if I can just add to that quickly, I think it's the acknowledgement. First, on one hand, it's the acknowledgement of how important family and carers are in someone's life. I think we've been untethered from our people in our planning. And I think sometimes there's a fear that carers say, and family, I'm around. And so the agency will say, oh, well, you don't need anything then. So I think that's a real worry. So I think it's this acknowledgement. We've been talking about this kind of carer passport idea again of how do we have something that help where people acknowledge that, and it's not a legal, it's different to our legal instruments. It's that this is your role in that person's life. And so I think the agency acknowledging that you're really, really important, but also your right to a life is just as important. And so the goals have to really run parallel to the family and carers, journey. I mean, as my husband and I are getting older, we're more and more worried about what that looks like. How do we retire when we have a young person who may never leave home? So that safeguarding the future piece, and that's what carers keep us awake most at night, is what happens if we die tomorrow or can't do this anymore or lose our house because of the financial concerns. How do we keep doing that? So I think putting us back together, acknowledging the role, not that we don't all want independence, because guess what? I want independence too. And that's okay. So how do we all reach our goals? They're equal. We all have, human rights, and obviously we're here to help our people and the people we love have the best lives possible. But the agency and aged care as well really need to acknowledge that people can't live at home on a level 4 package without assistance from their family. they have to go into residential care. So let's accept what's needed and let's make the systems better to support that happening so that we can age together in a village.
Very true. And employers, workplaces are a huge part of that. I've got to say thank you so much to all of you for sharing such enlightening insights. Diane says this has been enlightening. Thank you for coming together. And thank you for everyone who's joined us in this conversation. I hope it's helped you in some way. And I challenge all of us to just do one little thing of self-care, even if it is just a kind word while you're brushing your teeth to yourself at night today. Mel Spencer, Anu Weddisinger, and Meredith Khoo, thank you so much for joining us here at Women's Agenda. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.